the funding keeps up with the demand, which hasn't happened.
And spend more money and spend more money.
Yep, rather than using it to cut taxes for the small proportion who have private health insurance or can send their children to private school or are big corporations or the 4% that pay inheritance tax. Yes, I would rather that money went into the NHS than all of those things. I would rather that money went into the NHS than building more prisons to lock up every single drug dealer in this country for life. Yes, I'm afraid I would. And on that, Daniel, and everything else I suspect that we could possibly talk about, we can...
Nigel Farage just did what he swore he never would. A complete U-turn on Reform UK's biggest economic promise. £90 billion in tax cuts. Gone. And with that, the mask slips. For all their talk about being different from the establishment, Reform UK is now walking the same tired path as the parties they claim to despise. So tonight, we're revisiting a call that perfectly exposes that illusion. A Reform supporter convinced his party was the voice of common sense. But as you'll see, the argument falls apart the moment reality steps in. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Wouldn't call 20% of the population taking part in a YouGov poll and actually publicly saying that they would vote for them a pressure group. I would have called them a pressure group if we were talking a year ago with Richard Tice in charge and single digits in polling, and bearing in mind that we all know that YouGov polls are usually underestimated. And people, I suppose you could argue, were shy Tory voters and wouldn't normally admit they were going to vote Tory. Probably you would say you've now got the shy Reform impact, probably because certain members of the party or certain policies are presented to be potentially very political in their extent around race and immigration, which makes certain bits of it uncomfortable. But no, I wouldn't call them a pressure group. I'd call them someone who's actually talking common sense, because the Tories have spent the last 14 years promising us everything. I don't even bother reading their manifesto, because you may as well use it as yesterday's chip paper or toilet paper, because none of it ever comes true. None of it ever gets reality. They've promised they're going to get net immigration down to the tens of thousands for God knows how long now. I think it's in the last 4 manifestos. They've still not achieved it.
The Reform
Labour Party's idea.
The Reform,
go ahead.
The Reform Party, just on that, the Reform Party talking about zero net migration. That's not realistic.
I don't think that's actually the words that were used. It was to get it under control. So again, that's another inflammatory direction.
No, they are promising net zero migration.
Yes. Getting it down to the point where it's under control. At the moment, it is out of control. So why are we then having a whole argument about if you're coming to university, you need to bring your dependents? You're coming here to study. You don't need to bring your entire family. And to the point the gentleman was making earlier on about, well, if you want to, in effect, remove your right to use the NHS and remove your right to take part in the use of public services like schools, why shouldn't you get a tax break? It's actually not a bad idea, because if we end up with Labour in, we're going to stick a 20% tax threshold onto private schools. And granted, the rich, the absolute super rich, the top 1%, it won't even net on their income. They'll just increase their price on something, not even notice the cost. But those families that are out there working hard to try and deliver a better success for their children.
But that's most families. That's Daniel.
Don't try and cut
I'm not having that.
That's most families.
The idea that private school. Sorry, no. I'm not going to let you finish your point, because that is incredible. No, I'm going to let you come back, but I'm not going to let you get away with claiming that parents that send their children to private schools somehow work harder or care more about their children's education, because that's not the case, and it's massively offensive, I think, to claim that it is.
Again, no, you want to take offence to it, you take offence.
It is offensive. Because most people care about their children's education. They can't afford to send their kids to private school.
They don't. That's fantastic for them. Go and get a job where you can afford it. If those people have got a job and they want to
those nurses, money, those outrageous nurses, Daniel, come on,
get
real.
Let me finish the point.
No, because you're not letting me come back at all. You're just talking and talking and talking, and you're not letting me challenge it. Are you seriously saying that nurses and, I don't know, junior doctors and teachers and police officers who can't afford to send their children to private school It's on them because they should just go and become bankers. Is that really what you're telling me?
No, because again, you're not letting me finish. And actually, if you look at it, the vast majority of public sector working teachers actually send a lot of their kids to private schools.
That's nonsense.
So back to the point I was trying to make.
Just again, you're saying things that aren't true. You're saying things that are false. You cannot come on the radio and say the majority of teachers in this country send their children to private school. It's untrue. It's a lie.
It is incorrect, and you're wrong. So back to the point I'm trying to make. So if we then whack a 20% tax increase on private schools, where are the seats coming from? Where are the teachers coming from in the public sector to teach these children? Well, there isn't the teachers. Because we have 500 of them coming over on a boat every day.
500
what? Them up in hotels. 500 immigrants of all working age and kids coming over on boats on a daily basis. Then we're schooling them, we're feeding them, we're putting them up in hotels, we're giving them money.
And you think that's why we haven't got enough teachers?
No, we haven't got enough teachers because we can't have the money to put any more in, because we haven't got enough people working, because people don't want to work, because they don't want to bloody pay more tax. So if we move the tax thresholds up, people will declare more of their income. Therefore, then people will earn more.
What if we just paid teachers more?
Where's the money coming from? What tax would you like to raise this week? Because I'm bored of
I tell you what I wouldn't do, Daniel. I tell you what I wouldn't do.
Individuals,
Daniel,
what would you like to raise?
You asked me, let me answer the question. I tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't cut taxes for those that are lucky enough to send their children to private school. I wouldn't cut taxes for those that are lucky enough to have private healthcare. I wouldn't cut taxes for the 4% of people that pay inheritance tax. And I wouldn't cut taxes for the big corporations that pay corporation tax. Would you?
No one's asking about cutting tax.
Yes,
that's
those four things. Sorry, those are reform. Daniel, those tax cuts are Reform Party policy.
Yes, and my point being is, all we ever talk about is adding more tax, but nothing ever.
But you're saying there's not enough money to recruit teachers while supporting tax cuts for the wealthiest people in society. Is that right?
Hang on. How is moving the tax threshold from 12,500 to 20,000 helping the richest people? Because that's what we were talking about a second ago.
It's the other four tax cuts that I just mentioned to you.
And they are a suggestion, which actually, if you're turning around and saying you've paid in and your NI a percentage of money that's allocated to your cost of using the NHS, and you're saying I'm not going to use the NHS, I have no right to use it, I revoke my right.
Right, so those people with private health insurance, when they need an ambulance, what happens then?
Then they don't get one. That's the point. You're basically saying, I am quite happy to give up my rights to use the NHS and I will go private. Therefore, why shouldn't you have the money back for that? Because what you're basically saying
do you think the people that don't directly use
my right to use
Daniel, you've got to let me come back. You can't just talk endlessly. You have to let me come back. Do you think the people that have private health insurance benefit from the NHS in other ways?
In what extent?
To the extent that having an actually healthy society where people who can't afford private healthcare can get treated and therefore go back to work is a good thing for all of us, even if we have private healthcare?
I don't disagree with you, but my point is, why am I then paying for, say, for example, I can afford private healthcare. Yeah. Why am I then paying for everybody else?
Because you benefit from having a functioning health system.
But that doesn't function, that we invest billions more every year in, that doesn't work, that you can't get a medical appointment, that you can't see a doctor, that you can't see a dentist. So it doesn't work. No matter how much more money we pump in, it doesn't work. So it's like the exact argument of just doing something for the sake of doing it. We're all so emotional about the NHS. It doesn't work. It
did work, didn't it? It worked until quite recently. It worked pretty well.
It hasn't worked.
And it can work again if the funding keeps up with the demand, which hasn't happened.
And spend more money and spend more money.
Yep. Rather than using it to cut taxes for the small proportion who have private health insurance or can send their children to private school or are big corporations or the 4% that pay inheritance tax. Yes, I would rather that money went into the NHS than all of those things. I would rather that money went into the NHS than building more prisons to lock up every single drug dealer in this country for life. Yes, I'm afraid I would. And on that, Daniel, and everything else I suspect that we could possibly talk about, we're going to disagree.
What we just witnessed wasn't a simple radio debate. It was a full display of what Reform UK truly represents beneath the slogans and sound bites. The caller's argument, claiming that parents who send their kids to private schools simply work harder, wasn't just offensive. It revealed the class divide at the heart of the reform movement. When Ben calmly dismantled that claim, the truth became impossible to ignore. This ideology isn't about fairness or logic. It's about resentment. carefully packaged and sold as common sense. And now, with Nigel Farage abandoning his signature tax plan, that resentment has a face. Reform UK promised economic revolution, but all they've delivered is recycled Thatcherism with a fresh coat of populist paint. Their message to Britain's working class is simple. Look down, not up. Blame your neighbor, not the billionaire. It's politics of division disguised as plain speaking, and it's every bit as dangerous as it sounds. Because when you strip away the marketing, Reform UK offers no plan for the NHS, no strategy for schools, no vision beyond outrage. Just anger, scapegoating, and a promise to make Britain smaller, meaner, and more divided. Farage calls it reform. History will call it regression. So, what do you think? Is this really the future Britain wants? Or just another rerun of the same old betrayal? Let me know your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more breakdowns like this.